Morning everyone. Today we'll take a look at one more topic from your essay paper this year. But before I start with that topic, before we look at that, let me briefly one more time recap what we've already said. Again, there were 8 topics this year, and in this video we'll take a look at the first topic that was asked, that forests are the best case studies for economic excellence. What that means, how you interpret it, what you write over here, I'll come to in a minute. But first again, simple format that you follow, 8 para essay and 4 segments into which we divide these 8 paragraphs. The first part is your introduction. What is your intention in the introduction? To give a preview of your essay, to convey to the examiner that your understanding of the topic is right, to generate interest in your essay and to create a positive impact on the basis of which he assesses your essay a little more favorably. Second is body paragraph number 1. In reflective essays, the most important part of your essay. This is where you convey your interpretation and hopefully a correct interpretation of the topic. After that, number 3, 5 more body paragraphs. You're writing 1200 words in total. So at least 5 body paragraphs, each body paragraph with a different perspective, with a different dimension that you're discussing in it. And fourth, finally, a conclusion. In the conclusion, what do? One last time, one final time, reinforce the topic and again do it correctly. Now, with this in mind, this we've already discussed. With this in mind, let me take a look at this topic over here. The first topic that was asked, forests are the best case studies for economic excellence. Now, what I have said in the earlier video also, out of the 8 topics that were asked this year, there were 2 of them that were slightly challenging, and both of them were not purely philosophical, were not purely reflective. This is the first of those 2. Now here, when we say forests are the best case studies for economic excellence, there are 2 dimensions that are simultaneously involved. I cannot say, when I say that these are, this is one of the essays that a student ideally would prefer not to write about, it does not mean that this topic is difficult. It does not mean that it is too challenging, but yes, this topic is, an appropriate word to use, is a little dense. What do you mean by a dense topic? That in every single paragraph, starting from your introduction, going to your body, coming to your conclusion, in all of them, 2 elements you will have to simultaneously keep addressing. Number 1, what we learn from forests, and number 2, how we use this learning in economic systems, especially with the intention of generating excellence, of generating growth, of generating good quality development in our economies. Whether you're writing an example, whether you're talking about a point, whether you're making an argument, throughout in every paragraph, you will have to maintain a correlation between the 2. This is why it's not difficult to do. Unfortunately, it becomes a little dense. When I have the time to prepare for this topic, when I'm sitting at home, if I have a couple of hours to ideate, to brainstorm, writing this topic will not be a challenge. But in the exam hall, this topic or such a topic will create 2 problems. Number 1, my interpretation may not be right. And number 2, in my writing, I might not be able to do justice to both of them. What is the problem with the interpretation? Now, again, the manner in which we are taught, the manner in which we are instructed, the moment a student sees the word forest, there's a high probability they will relate this only with the environment. They will relate this only with the degradation of the local environment. They will talk about deforestation. They will talk about excessive mining. All of those to an extent are right. But this is not a reflective topic. This is a topic that largely, primarily focuses upon economics. And here you expect you to to develop a correlation between economic excellence, economic growth on the one hand, and the learnings that you get from a forest on the other. Most of your discussion in a topic like this should not be based upon forest. That is just the platform. The discussion has to focus on economic excellence. 1. So the interpretation might sometimes go a little wrong. Number 2, when you're writing this again in every paragraph, you will have to maintain a balance between the 2. Now, without delay, to understand this topic, in body paragraph number 1, what do? You provide your interpretation of the topic. And over here, again, 3 simple questions on the basis of which we try to develop this interpretation correctly. First question, the topic says forests are the best case studies for economic excellence. Question is, how is a forest a case study for economic excellence? What does case study signify? Case study signifies that this is something that becomes a model for me. This is something that becomes a source of reference for me. This is something that becomes a source of learning for me. Now, what do forests teach us? If, let's say in India, I want to ensure economic excellence, I want to ensure that we become a $5 trillion economy soon, what do forests teach us? Forests teach us many things. Most importantly, they teach us that if you want to live well, if you want to prosper economically, you will have to ensure that your growth is organic and is symbiotic. What do you mean by symbiosis? Where all the parties mutually benefit from the relationship. A forest will not be able to grow, will not be able to thrive, will not be able to create a good quality ecosystem unless and until its growth is organic and it is symbiotic, where every species benefits from the presence of others. And the same organic symbiotic growth is what economic excellence will also depend upon. That is what forests teach us. Number two, what exactly do these forests teach? Forests teach us that a good ecosystem, whether it is economic, whether it is environmental, needs the contribution and needs the collaboration of every single individual, every single organism, whether it is big or it is small. Forest teach us. What do forests have? They have a lot of resistance. They have a lot of resilience to any sort of shocks, to any sort of calamities. If an earthquake happens in a city, the consequences could be disastrous and recovering would be significantly difficult as compared to a similar calamity if it happens in a forest. Forests also teach us about ecological preservation. That if you want growth to be sustainable, you will have to preserve the local ecology. You cannot have sustainable growth at the expense of the local environment, at the expense of the local ecology. Now, if forests teach us that everyone should contribute, if forests teach us that you should be resilient, if forests teach us that you must preserve the ecology, how do we adopt these learnings into an economic system? And for this, 5 simple principles again that we discussed in your notes also. 5 simple principles. Number 1, participation of all. Number 2, equity for different sections. Number 3, maintaining growth. Number 4, maintaining stability in your growth. And number 5, sustainability of your economic system. The 5 principles that we've discussed earlier or that we've discussed in class, the same 5 principles, what will they become for me? They will now become for me my body paragraphs. How you will write them, we'll come to in a couple of minutes. But again, 5 simple principles. And even if you don't have the notes, 5 simple principles that we're learning from here: participation, equity, growth, stability, and sustainability. Now, this is our understanding, this is our interpretation of the topic, that we are not writing about forests. We are writing about what we learn from forests and how we can use this to ensure and to sustain economic growth, economic excellence. Now, this I'll write in body paragraph number 1. What do I write in my introduction? Like I said earlier also, this topic is a little dense. It's not difficult. It's a little dense. So in every paragraph that you're writing, maintain a balance simultaneously between the learnings that you get from a forest and what this means to you, how you apply it in the economy. Now, what do forests teach me? In my introduction, I can write many things. Couple of points here, let me discuss. Forests teach us that if you want to grow, you have to be resilient to environmental shocks. When we talk about a forest, I am talking about the environment quite literally. But when I talk about the economy, what does this become? This becomes resilience to any upsets, any disruptions that are happening around you. What is the last disruption that we saw? That on a global level was the COVID pandemic. And how do you display this resilience? In India, for example, that is the barbell strategy of the government of India. What is a barbell strategy? That simultaneously the government adopted two basic interventions. Number 1, we immediately locked a very strict lockdown. Why did we do that? To ensure that we were able to save lives, prevent the transmission of the virus, and in the meantime, buy time to ensure that our healthcare systems could be ramped up, our facilities, our infrastructure could be improved. But that was one part. What is the second part of the barbell? The government realized that when you're imposing these lockdowns, this will have an adverse impact on economic growth, on economic opportunities. So simultaneously, the government came up with relief measures to boost the economy. It started, we have Atmanirbhar Bharat, we have the world's largest free food program, We have concessions that were given to medium scale, small scale industries. What are you doing? You are developing resilience towards these environmental shocks, towards the COVID shock. And who teaches you this? A forest. What else do forests teach us? I don't want to write this introduction. I'll write another one. I will say that forests teach us the importance of ecological preservation. Where ecologies are not preserved, a forest very soon will start dwindling and will start losing out. For example, your Amazon rainforest. But if you want to strive for excellence, now how do you adopt this in your economic systems? For example, by promoting or by boosting ecotourism. In India, the value of ecotourism currently is $121 billion, but by 2029, another 6 or 7 years, it's expected to shoot up to 512. A course of business actions, a course of economic actions that is not only economically beneficial but also ensures the preservation of the local ecology. You want to write this in your introduction. Don't want to write this, add another one. Forests are the best case studies for economic excellence. Why? Forests teach us that in this world, it is the survival of the fittest. If you are weak, if you cannot adapt, if you cannot innovate, very soon you will get left behind. Similarly, what do we talk about in economic systems? For instance, unicorns in India. India currently, and that's a matter of pride for us, India currently is the third largest ecosystem in the world for startups on a global level. At the moment, we have 105. This is from July 2022. We have 105 unicorns. What is a unicorn, by the way? A privately held company with a valuation of more than $1 billion. India currently has 105 unicorns, which are collectively worth about $340 billion. And who's teaching us that? That is your forest. That for any of these companies, any of these startups to be able to sustain themselves, they will have to innovate, they will have to compete. Only then can you survive. Proving again that forests are the best case studies for economic excellence. They teach you how to excel in the economic domain also. Another example that we can use over here, very common, is the food chain. And if you are lower in the food chain, if you're not at the apex, if you are lower in the food chain, you must be very careful about predators. You will not leave aside economic excellence. You will not even be able to ensure economic survival unless you know how to deal with predators. And here, whose example can you give? In the economic domain, this takes the form of predatory lending, especially by this country called China. Now here, we would try not to be too critical. We'll try to be as institutional as possible by saying that predatory lending can have disastrous consequences for the borrowing country. And who's teaching us that? Again, we're getting that learning from the forest. Another example, if you wanted to use, or another platform that you wanted to use, forests teach us about the optimum utilization of resources. In the forest, not one single resource is ever wasted. If there is autumn and if leaves are falling from a tree, the leaves that fall on the floor of the forest will not go to waste. They will not create a problem for you. Even they will be used as organic manure. Similarly, what do we learn from there? Optimum utilization. In India, what do we utilize? We utilize 7,500 kilometers of our coastline. We utilize 14,000 kilometers of our inland waterways. And this takes the form now of a Sagarmala program. Once the Sagarmala program is completed, what will it do? It will significantly reduce infrastructural and transportation costs in the country, boosting the chances of India achieving economic excellence. Now, these are some introductions, some points you can use in your introduction, you can use in your conclusion. But here I'll add a couple of points for you. Number one, in every paragraph that you're writing, maybe this becomes my introduction, maybe I write this in my introduction. Whatever you're writing, again, ensure that in the paragraph, both elements are simultaneously addressed. Number one, what was your learning from the forest? How was a forest a case study? Because it is teaching me something. And this is what it is teaching me. Number two, in the same paragraph, you must also explain how this learning, how this teaching can be implemented, can be manifested in the economy. First. Second, when you look at these examples given over here, and that is the word I was using a couple of minutes back, we are talking about examples that are institutional. Please do not use examples for want of a better word. Let me use the word pedestrian. Do not use examples that are pedestrian. What does pedestrian mean? Pedestrian means don't use examples that are critical, don't use examples that are casual, don't use the kind of examples that you would use in a living room discussion, in a coffee room discussion with your friends. For example, here, I would not expect you to talk about businessmen. I would not expect you to talk about small incidents that happen in the country. I would not expect you to talk about examples that happen on the streets. Please talk about larger, macro level institutional examples. Now, I got an email yesterday. For example, I've just written the word pedestrian over here. Someone sent me an email and said that, sir, some of these words are difficult. For example, a word like pedestrian, isn't it too much of English? Please remember, this is the civil services mains. Last year, see, again, a lot of people create this false narrative that this is not an exam about English. This is an example about content, about the essay, or any other paper in your mains. Remember that the better your command over your language, whether it is English, whether it is Hindi, the better is your command over the language, the better you will be able to express yourself. The kind of words that they had asked in the paper last year, when they used again words like chimera, words like utopia, unless you raise your standards, unless you elevate your standards, you will find yourself in a very difficult position in the exam. But any which way, coming back here, uh, five different points, five different platforms that we could have used in the introduction, and the more important point or the conclusion, more important point, in each paragraph you're maintaining a balance between these two parameters. Now my introduction is done, my conclusion is done, my body paragraph 1 is done. I have to write 5 more body paragraphs, and in each paragraph I should be able to give a different dimension. I should be able to discuss a different perspective. So now, let's say we are writing the first body or the second body paragraph now. In every paragraph, what do I have to tell you? I have to explain to the reader how a forest serves as a case study to enable us to strive for economic excellence. So first question I ask myself is, what hinders, what is an obstacle for economic excellence? What is an obstacle? Number one, for example, on the basis of gender, in our country, a low women's labor force participation rate. Between 2005 and 2018, in about a period of about 14 years, the women's labor force participation rate in India has dropped by 20 percentage points. That is a cause for concern. Now, in this case, what is the learning from Forrest? That if you want to excel in any field, in any endeavor, you will have to ensure the participation of all. Any forest, for example, you'll have to ensure the participation and the survival of your keystone species. In a forest, every single organism, whether it is a plant, whether it is an animal, whether it is an insect, every single organism will have to participate, will have to contribute. That is what leads to the richness and the diversity of the ecosystem. Similarly, now how do you apply this to economic systems? By promoting gender parity. But how do you promote gender parity? Fewer women are participating. How do you promote that? A very simple example from India is the case of Startup India. In Startup India, what are we doing? We are giving loans at a lower rate of interest, at a preferential rate of interest, when at least one of the borrowers is a woman. What is the intention? To promote entrepreneurship among women. And when you do that, what are you doing? You will address this low labor force participation rate. That now paves the way for economic excellence in the future. And who taught us this? This is your forest, that every person, every segment of society must get a chance to participate. Similarly, what hinders economic excellence? Another paragraph if I want to write, what hinders economic excellence is that there are certain sections in our society which do not get the chance to gainfully participate in economic processes. One such section of people who are often ignored are people who are differently abled or people who have disabilities. In this case, what do forests teach us? Forests teach us equity. Forests teach us that in any system, there is always, or there should be at least always be, a symbiotic relationship where both the parties or all the involved parties mutually benefit from that relationship. This symbiosis, this equity, how do I incorporate that in economic systems? by improving the attitudes and the perceptions of people with regard to the hiring, with regard to the capabilities of people who have disabilities. And a very good example here is the example of Costa Coffee. Costa Coffee is an outlet, or there is an organization whose outlets hire people who have hearing disabilities. And they not only hire people who have hearing disabilities, they hire them for not back end but front end operations. The people who are hired are taught how to communicate with customers using non-verbal signals. Now, what is the advantage over here? And when we say that you improve attitudes and perceptions, the simple understanding that even if a person has, for example, a hearing impairment, such a person is more likely to be committed to their work, is more likely to work harder to ensure that they're able to come at par with people who do not have these disabilities. With such people, loyalty will be higher, retention will be higher, attrition or the chances of the employee leaving will be significantly lower. And where are we developing this learning from? Again, from Forrest. It's a mutually beneficial relationship. How is it mutually beneficial? Costa Coffee says, and this is the declaration that they make, that their customers, when they interact with these employees, say that by the time they leave the outlet after finishing one cup of coffee, have a newfound respect, have a newfound appreciation for people who are looking past their disabilities and still trying to create economic potential for themselves. What does this do? In the long run, again, this paves the way for economic excellence. So number one, they're teaching us about equity. Number two, or number three now, Forrest will also teach us that we should promote growth. Now, what acts as a hindrance or what acts as an obstacle for economic excellence in India immediately after independence? This is protectionism. What is protectionism? That you're creating artificial, let me write the full word, artificial trade barriers to protect your domestic industries. Now, after independence, India followed or adopted a policy of protectionism. We tried to keep our domestic industries safe. But what is the problem? We had a very large market in the country. Despite that, our domestic industries did not work, did not compete, did not innovate at the rate at which they could have. We had a large captive market in the country, but our industries were not able to capitalize upon that. Over a period of time, not only does the quality of your goods and services deteriorate, even your growth rate will start falling. And that again in India is what we call the Hindu rate of growth, which we witnessed till almost 1991, 1992. Now in this case, what do forests teach us? Forests teach us that in a forest, in a jungle, only the fittest will survive. If you want growth, only the fittest will be able to survive. What does this mean for economic systems? That you will have to promote competition, you will have to promote innovation. Any organization that wants to exist in the country will have to constantly adapt, constantly adopt, constantly compete, and constantly innovate. If you're not able to innovate, you'll get left behind. On a global level, this economic excellence, who's lost that? If I was talking to you about, I don't remember now, maybe 10, maybe 15 years ago, one of the biggest telephone companies in the world, mobile companies in the world, was a company called Nokia. But Nokia got complacent. When Nokia got complacent, what does that lead to? Growth will not exist. They will not be able to survive. And new companies like Samsung and Apple will take a larger and a larger share of the economic pie. In this case, how do you promote it? For example, promote competition, promote innovation by using or by signing more free trade agreements. And the more you do this, what are you introducing in your economy? Competition, innovation. And the more the competition and innovation, the more the chances again that very soon you will be able to achieve economic excellence. That's one more thing that Forrest teaches us, that for growth, you will have to maintain the survival of the fittest. Another learning that we get from Forrest is the learning related to stability. What do you mean by stability? Now, one major hindrance, especially again in our country, for economic excellence is what we call unemployment. That unemployment, there are many ways you can categorize it. You can say there is seasonal unemployment. You can say there is increasing unemployment. You can say there is disguised unemployment and so on. Bottom line is that unemployment rate in the country is extremely high. Now here, what do forests teach us? Forests teach us stability. Now, if there is seasonal unemployment at a time when most people are not able to find livelihoods, they are not able to find stable, gainful employment, in your system, you need to develop resilience. How do you develop resilience? You develop resilience, for example, by promoting welfare schemes and especially the last mile delivery of these schemes. That when a person is not gainfully employed, you must have systems, you must have automated systems in your country through which these people can be given welfare, can be given relief. And this in India from 2021 takes the form of your e-Shram portal. The e-Shram portal will create a database, automated database of 38 crore people in the unorganized sector, ensuring that whenever they are suffering, at that time, appropriate targeted interventions can be made for their welfare. And when you make these interventions, what is that doing? Again, that is paving the way for economic excellence in the future. You want to say unorganized workers, very good. You want to say gig workers over here, you can use them also. Fundamentally, what are we doing? That any person who suffers any lack of social justice, any lack of economic opportunities, any lack of economic justice, they should be appropriately addressed. Develop their resilience, build their resistance. One more paragraph, one last paragraph. If I want to write over here, what do forests teach me? One more principle, sustainability. Now, what impedes, what hinders economic excellence? Long-term economic excellence, long-term economic growth will require intergenerational equity. What one generation, there's a Native American saying that we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from future generations. We borrow it from our children. Similarly, the resources, environmental resources, economic resources that one generation had cannot be lost or cannot be completely wasted, squandered away before the next generation arrives. What do forests teach us? They teach us sustainability in the form of ecological preservation. How do I use this in economic systems? For example, by adopting electric vehicles. Now, when you adopt electrical vehicles, not only is this environmentally beneficial, it is also economically very good. Because now what do I need? Number one, my manufacturing sector gets a boost. Number two, my service sector gets a boost. I will need more manpower. I need better trained manpower. I will need reskilling. I will need upskilling. I will need automation, and yet everyone's earning potential will increase. And of course, the robustness of the economy increases with that. And in India, what form does this take? This takes the form of a pilot project called FAME. What is a FAME project? 100 crore rupees manufacturing of electric vehicles in India for mass transportation. 100 crore rupees has been sanctioned by the government of India to increase the production and to increase the adoption of electrical vehicles for mass transportation in the country. And of course, this is your fifth paragraph, and the essay over here very comfortably comes to an end. This was not a difficult topic, it was only a topic that was slightly dense. The one key part that you're supposed to keep in mind was that throughout the essay, you have to explain how forests serve as a point of reference for us, and using that point of reference, economic systems can be made more robust, economic excellence can be further promoted. All right. This is one more topic. Sometime soon, we'll discuss the remaining topics also. Thank you.